Live from Quito, Ecuador, I'm Sonia Gray, and this is From the South, the evening news brief from Tell Us Your English, and we start this new edition right now. The countdown to elections in Honduras is coming to an end, and ahead of Sunday's ballot, feminist organizations have been calling for people to not vote for candidates who do not offer solutions to their specific problems and the other social issues that directly affect women.
Maria Esteban is a part of the most ignored groups by the government. She's an elderly woman who goes out every day to collect garbage that she later sells to be able to bring home less than $2 to try and cover her basic needs.
I've never had anything. You can see that this government has helped other people, but not me. And they have never given me anything. Not a bag of food, no money. They decided who gets things. Those people are selfish. They only help their families.
The problems of the Honduran women is reflected in low wages and the unemployment rate, which reaches up to 30%. Also setbacks in education, where illiteracy is at 16%. They say there's a lack of will from the government to improve the condition of life for over 2 million women who live on the poverty line.
We are living with deep setbacks of over 50 years. We are rooting not so much on negotiations during this election, but more for a route that women can take in order to set their own agenda for women.
We are continuing here, and they're ending their campaign and have mentioned very little topics, to be honest. So that's why we're calling on the people, the women, to not vote as zombies. They have to know how to choose, not just voting.
Several organizations like this are taking advantage of this political campaign. They had very little answers.
In the case of the Alliance, we got to include a whole chapter about women's rights through work with various women and feminist platforms. In the case of the National Party, the gender issue is discussed, but in a very superficial way.
Organized women are also pushing to have agrarian laws which are focused on their gender. Only an estimated 8% of the women have access to land.
Let's go live to Honduras and our correspondent Heather Geese. Heather. There was a spike of violence in Honduras at the beginning of this week with the murder of at least 3 opposition activists. What is the mood like now in Honduras, and what are people expecting for this weekend?
So leading up to this election, there's been a lot of talk that President Juan Orlando Hernandez is projected to win the election, which is a really controversial issue because the Honduran Constitution has a ban on presidential elections. 2016 court ruling gave away with that ban on re-election, allowed candidate. This has been really controversial.
Okay, so we're going to have to cut, sorry Heather, we're going to have to cut our interview with Heather Geese very short because we're having some technical issues. But we're going to try and work on them and go back to Heather later on in this newscast. So on to other news. Oh, we have another interview actually at the moment. It is with Silvio Carrillo. Because Honduras has one of the highest proportions of migrants in the United States in any Central American country, and their vote on Sunday is expected to play a significant part in the results. We're going to be joined now by Silvio Carrillo. He's an activist there, and he's also the nephew of the murdered Honduran activist Bertha Cáceres. Hello, Silvio.
Hi,
thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so looking at these elections from the United States, what do you see as the main issues?
Well, there's a lot. We could be here all day. The main issue is the fact that this is an illegal move an unprecedented move by the current Honduran president. He should not be running for a second term. it's illegal, as stated as such by the Honduran Constitution. And he, a few years ago, he managed to manipulate the Constitution and get the Supreme Court to approve his re-election. And it's a sad state of affairs when the fact that he's running for a second term is what actually ended up helping to put his predecessor in office when they took out Manuel Zelaya in 2009 for allegedly doing the same thing. So this is a huge issue. It's full of corruption, and this is all very well documented in the Honduran and the American media. Yesterday, an op-ed piece by Representative Jan Schakowsky of Chicago wrote a powerful op-ed piece saying we should not be supporting, and nor this government, but the U.S. State Department is wholeheartedly backing.
So, Sylvia, your aunt, Bertha Cáceres, was the leader of COPIN, the indigenous organization. What attitude are they and other social movements taking to these elections?
Well, they're trying to defend themselves. Sadly, they have to, they're fighting for their own existence. COPIN, for instance, has been attacked repeatedly. There was a report that came out recently that stated how the government, the Honduran government itself, was trying to sabotage not just the investigation into my aunt's assassination, but also sabotage the COPIN, the organization she created 20-some-odd years ago that her daughter now runs. So many of these activists that are there in Honduras as observers there are a lot of restrictions placed on them. There are new, they call them, there are new anti-terrorism laws, which suggest that they are supposed to tamp down on protests, on extreme protests, but there's nothing of the sort. These people are peaceful, and they're just fighting for what's right. Just like my aunt, she was a peaceful protest. She was never completely nonviolent, and the Honduran government is trying to paint her as some kind of armed rebel that was just a pain in their behind, which she was.
Thank you so much. We've just been chatting to Silvio Carrillo. He's a Honduran activist based in the United States. Other news now. Everything is ready for the first round of municipal elections in Cuba on Sunday. More than 8 million Cubans are eligible to elect the delegates from the more than 12,000 constituencies. Those elected will serve on the municipal assemblies of popular power for 2.5 years. In those voting districts where no candidate has more than 50% of the vote, a second round will take place on December 3rd. Argentine activist Santiago Maldonado drowned, according to the autopsy results just announced in Buenos Aires by Judge Gustavo Leal. However, the activist's family continues to push for an independent investigation, saying the ambiguous results of the autopsy do not rule out a violent cause of death. 28-year-old Santiago was found floating in the Chubut River. He'd been missing for 77 days following the violent repression of a Mapuche community by the Argentine police. And for more on the case and the controversy surrounding the new announcement, we have this report.
The autopsy report confirmed the absence of lacerations and stated that Santiago died from suffocation.
We can't tell when Santiago died, but it was confirmed that he stayed submerged in the same river for a long time. Nonetheless, we cannot figure out how or when he died.
55 experts concluded that the young activist was in the water for around 50 to 70 days.
There is no change in the state of the case. It is described as a forced disappearance, followed by death. We still have to wait for the investigation to develop. It feels like we are back at the beginning.
Regardless of the results, the Maldonado family awaits a new episode of the investigation to be started in order to find the truth and identify all those responsible of his kidnapping and death.
The government wants to close the case, but Sergio Maldonado, Santiago's brother, and his family say that this case is just starting, because it's now when the fight against impunity begins. We find the government and the police responsible for Santiago's death.
Santiago's family continue to ask for justice 4 months on, after the brutal repression by police to the Mapuche people in Chubut province, where Santiago was last seen alive.
Staying with news out of Argentina, a crew of Russian Navy specialists has joined the search operations for the missing, as hopes fade of finding the missing submarine. The team consists of unmanned underwater remote control device called Panther Plus, as well as deep-sea divers and a doctor from the Russian Navy. Our correspondent, Edgardo Esteban, has the latest from Buenos Aires.
This is the 9th day of the disappearance of the Ara San Juan submarine on the Austral-Argentinian Sea. This search is being moved forward with the international collaboration of over 4,000 officials who have the task of finding it. But the uncertainty continues. There's no indication yet on where it is, and the hypothesis on the reasons of the disappearance are still generating and multiplying. But the truth is that there was a call on Wednesday the 15th, which after a few hours an explosion was detected. And now, after 9 days, President Mauricio Macri has made statements about the situation, after the government went silent about this and its political cost. But today, Macri finally went to the Liberty Building, the headquarters of the Argentinian Navy, to meet with its highest officials and to be updated about the situation. He also reiterated the searches will continue until the submarine is found, and he also expressed his respects to the families. But this is a really complex and difficult situation, with tension and political costs, because changes in the army are expected, particularly in the Navy, and the changes from the Defense Ministry after this complicated situation. Because there's still no concrete investigations about how this happened, its conditions, and if it was suitable for sailing, and how this explosion happened, if it was one. A battery complication, or maybe because of other reasons, which needs to be investigated after it's found. But these are all speculations, and we have to wait.
And we have more news in a minute, so stay with us. Colombia is celebrating the first anniversary of its landmark peace deal with the FARC rebels, which put an end to 53 years of armed conflict that left 260,000 people dead and many missing. Exactly a year after President Juan Manuel Santos and the leaders of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia signed the peace deal in Havana, Santos says he's satisfied with its implementation. But FARC and some social movements accuse the government of failing to keep all of its promises.
The peace agreement was difficult to achieve, very difficult, but silencing the guns has allowed us to save lives, thousands of lives. An independent study by Notre Dame University in the United States, the institution chosen by both parts to verify the process, has compared 34 peace processes around the world and concluded that ours, the Colombian one, is one of the best designed, one of the most complete, and its advances after 1 year have been faster than any other peace processes.
This day, the first anniversary of the signing of the peace deal, should be a moment for a national clamor, to promote a huge mobilization of Colombians to ensure that what was agreed is genuinely respected without mockery.
Today marks the 20th anniversary of the decriminalization of homosexuality in Ecuador. 20 years ago in Ecuador, an LGBTI person could be condemned for up to 8 years just for having consensual same-sex relationship. The LGBTI organizations will hold several events on Friday and Saturday in different Ecuadorian cities to commemorate those who died in the struggle to decriminalize sexual diversity and reaffirm the need to continue to work for more rights and inclusion. Russia and Venezuela have signed a series of cooperation agreements in areas of strategic interest for both countries. The agreements signed in the southern Russian city Sochi cover education and technology, as well as projects to develop mining in the Orinoco region of Venezuela. The Venezuelan Minister of Ecological Mining singled out Russia's interest in gold and diamond mining. Russia and Venezuela have been doing deals in Bolivia too. At the fourth gas exporting countries forum in Santa Cruz, Eulogio Del Pino, the president of the Russian state oil company PDVSA, tweeted a picture of himself and Russia's Minister of Energy signing deals. He said, "We note the successful and mutually beneficial energy cooperation between the Russian Federation and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela." And the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry tweeted out a video in which the Russian Energy Minister, Alexander Novak, said the unilateral sanctions by some countries, like the United States, against gas exporters like Iran, Russia, and Venezuela are unacceptable. Bolivia has also signed a new energy agreement with Russia's Gazprom company. During the gas forum, Gazprom will work on the exploration and exploitation of natural resources in two major regions of Bolivia and cooperate with the commercialization of liquid gas, as announced by the Minister of Energy, Luis Alberto Sanchez. Okay, so we're going to go back live to Honduras and our correspondent, Heather Geese. Hello, Heather. Are you hearing me?
Hi, Soyini.
Perfect. So we were saying initially that there was a spike of violence in Honduras at the start of the elections. About 3 activists were killed. What is the mood like in Honduras as we head to elections on Sunday?
So we know that since the 2009 coup in Honduras, the U.S.-backed military coup that ousted ex-President Manuel Zelaya, there has been a grave deterioration in the human rights situation. And these sorts of killings of political activists, environmental activists like Berta Cáceres have become all too common. So there is talk of a fear campaign being rolled out right now because turnout on Sunday at the polls will really have a bearing on the outcome of this election. So the opposition alliance, which is an alliance between the left-wing Libre Party and the anti-corruption candidate that debuted in the elections last time in 2013, Salvador Nasrallah, who's the candidate for the opposition alliance, have warned that this fear campaign is taking place and encouraged voters to not be intimidated and still show up to the polls to make their voices heard against the re-election of President Juan Orlando Hernandez.
So Heather, we've been hearing about how feminist organizations have been very active in the lead up to these elections. Have they been having any real impact? Do you expect them to have a real impact on Sunday?
So I heard recently from feminist activists who are involved in that initiative that you're referring to, which is an initiative to put women's rights on the agenda. I've heard from those activists that, yes, politicians in this election are talking about women's issues more than ever, but that's only because women's issues have never really been talked about at all in the elections. And we're talking about very serious issues. Women can go to jail for seeking an abortion under very strict laws regulating abortion in Honduras. The femicide situation is also a crisis. So there are a lot of serious women's issues that need to be dealt with, and these have been completely absent from politicians' agendas in recent elections. So the fact that women's rights are being talked about at all is a major improvement, but there's a lot of work still left to be done. And the feminist organizations that have been monitoring the 3 main presidential candidates in this election, President Juan Orlando Hernandez of the National Party, Salvador Nasrallah of the Opposition Alliance, and Luis Zelaya of the Liberal Party, they've reported that though all candidates have improved in mentioning the 7 priority issues on the women's agenda, the Opposition Alliance has gone the farthest to incorporate their demands into its platform. So we are seeing progress there with respect to women's rights. However, I should also note that the feminist movement in Honduras is also divided over this issue of using the election campaign as a way to advance their demands, because there's been a lot of controversy this election campaign over the issue of presidential re-election. President Juan Orlando Hernandez is the first sitting or former president to seek re-election in Honduras because it's outlawed in the Honduran constitution. So some feminist organizations, along with other parts of civil society, are saying that the struggle should really continue in the grassroots. And by putting pressure on candidates through this election campaign, it's only functioning to legitimize what they see as an otherwise illegal re-election campaign by the president.
Thank you so much, Heather. We've been speaking to Heather Guys. She's our correspondent in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. Other news now. Women from around Latin America and the Caribbean are continuing their 14th feminist meeting in Uruguay under the slogan Diversity but not Dispersion. They are discussing racism, discrimination, gender violence, and a feminist vision of the indigenous concept of good living, among other issues. The conference ends this Saturday with a big march for the Day Against Violence Against Women. Among those taking place is the niece of the Mirabal sisters, whose murder in the Dominican Republic inspired the day. On Thursday, residents of Beetham Gardens in Trinidad burned tires on the highway that lines their community, causing traffic gridlock, after 2 community leaders were taken in by police for questioning. The men were released hours later, but some cars were damaged by people throwing stones or trying to rob them. Prime Minister Keith Rowley held a press conference earlier to discuss the unrest.
I heard this morning one former national security minister saying that the government should put a police post in the Beetham and one in Sealots and one in so and so. That may sound good, but that cannot be the overriding solution. Where there is need and where we can afford to do it, but we cannot take the position that we will put a police post on every street corner. What I am talking about is law enforcement across the board, from St. Clair to Cedros, from Enterprise to Beetham, because that is how it has to be.
And we'll be back very soon, so stay with us. London's Oxford Street reopened after false reports of shots being fired in the area caused panic among the Christmas shopping crowds. London's Metropolitan Police said in a statement that they had found no evidence of gunfire, casualties, or any suspects, and that the incident had been stood down. The incident, which lasted for about 1 hour, had sparked fears of a terrorist incident.
Obviously in London, we imagine it's terror-related because of all the past events, and we were a few of us pushed into a storage room in Urban Outfitters, and what we can hear is like stampeding and people screaming, so we're essentially thinking like, oh my God, something really, really bad's going on.
Demonstrators have protested in Dhaka against the slavery and human trafficking of African migrants in Libya. The protest was called by Stop Slavery Collective to denounce the rape, torture and forced work of thousands of black Africans. The African Union, the UN, international NGOs and world leaders have all openly condemned recent revelations about this slave trade.
These are criminal practices that deserve to be investigated and persecuted. The event aims to call on African states to take the necessary action. Condemnation is not enough. We want concrete measures to get our brothers and sisters out of Libya. We also want to call on the International Criminal Court to investigate these crimes and persecute the criminals.
Now let's take a look at some of the stories that are making headlines in other parts of the world.
At least 235 people have been killed in an attack on a mosque in Sinai in Egypt. The attackers set off a bomb and opened fire on people as they prayed. According to local media, over 125 others were injured in the attack. No group has claimed responsibility for the assault. Emerson Mnangagwa has been sworn in as Zimbabwe's new president. Mnangagwa vowed sweeping changes and pledged to fight poverty and corruption after Robert Mugabe's shock resignation. In his inauguration address, Mnangagwa paid tribute to Mugabe, saying that the 93-year-old was the country's last remaining founding father. The new president's supporters turned out in droves and expressed their hopes for change.
We look forward to a unity government, an inclusive government where we have everybody coming in, every technocrat, despite who you are. We're not looking at race, we're not looking at party, theology or philosophy or whatever. We are looking at a new Zimbabwe where we get united and move forward as a nation.
South Africa's Supreme Court has increased Oscar Pistorius' murder sentence to 13 years and 5 months after the state argued that his original sentence of 6 years was shockingly lenient. Pistorius was imprisoned in July of 2016 after being found guilty on appeal of murdering girlfriend Reva Stenkamp on Valentine's Day in 2013. The National Prosecution Authority hopes the victim's family will find closure.
We further believe that this decision by the Supreme Court of Appeal will assist the family in finding closure, although we know that the sentence will not bring back their daughter, but it will, we hope it will facilitate closure in knowing that an appropriate sentence has been imposed.
Over 500 Amazon workers in Italy and Germany are on strike during one of the busiest shopping days of the year. This is the first ever strike over pay at Amazon's warehouse located near Milan, Italy, which employs 4,000 people. In a statement, the Verdi trade union said the employees are under too much pressure to do more in less time.
And with that, we've come to the end of this evening's news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, tellusyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I am Soini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.